Hey there everyone, and welcome to week 2 of the new series Transitions. In this week's series, we're talking about preparing for transitions. Have you ever been forced to transition into a completely new season or new part of your life? Maybe you joined a new school, left an old job, or maybe a worldwide pandemic derailed all of your plans. Let's be honest, these transitions can be scary. We tend to fear the unknown, and stepping out of our comfort zone is something that just never seems to get easier. I'm sure we can all relate to transitions in our life being a lot harder when there's no way to prepare for them. But what about some of the ways we can learn to prepare and plan for a transition? Do you think we can make transitions a lot easier by being prepared? When I think about the answer to these two questions, I'm reminded of a group of people in the Bible who had to go through a major transition. In the book of Exodus, Moses was trying to get the Israelites out of Egypt. This transition was one of the most life-altering and also terrifying journeys because Egypt was all the Israelites knew. They were kept as slaves in bondage for over 400 years. Imagine that. Imagine relocating out of a place that you've been for even 20 years, much less 430. As you can imagine, the Israelites probably felt the same way we do in transitions during our lives, during their life-altering trip to the Promised Land. Even during the midst of leaving Egypt, the Israelites were scared. At one point they even said, "For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than die here in the wilderness." Fortunately, however, the Israelites were eventually able to prepare for their transition out of Egypt. In preparation, the Israelites went to the wilderness to make sacrifices to God. This might seem strange to you, but back then this was completely normal because it meant that their sins were being covered by the blood of the sacrifices to be right in the eyes of God. And I know what you're probably thinking. How does making sacrifices in the wilderness relate to us today in terms of preparing for a transition? Well, let me explain this by using an example from my life where I had to make a sacrifice in order to prepare for a transition. When I was younger, all I wanted to do was be a professional athlete. It didn't matter what sport, but I always knew that being a pro athlete was going to be part of my future. I played literally every sport you can think of, but there was always an obstacle in my way. Whether it was an injury, a poor coach, or a bad season, something led me into another transition. I went from one sport to the next, transition after transition. The only issues were that I was never ready for the transitions. So I kept going nowhere. And similar to my obstacles of transition from sports, the Israelites faced obstacles of their own upon leaving Egypt. Every time they were close to getting set free, Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, changed his mind and didn't let them go. It took 10 plagues from God for Pharaoh to finally let the Israelites go. And in a similar way, it took me almost 10 sports to finally become a professional athlete. So it seems perfect, right? We did it. The Israelites made it out of bondage, and I achieved my childhood dream. But right as our dreams were about to get realized, we both had to prepare. So how did both me and the Israelites prepare? Sacrifices. You see, before going to the Promised Land, the Israelites had to prepare by sacrifice, as I mentioned earlier. So what did the Israelites do? The Israelites took a lot of their belongings with them, but ultimately had to make lots of sacrifices. These sacrifices were in order to get rid of things that were lesser than, in order to make room for the greater things that were to come. Similarly to the Israelites, I too had to prepare for my new transition by sacrificing. But for me, it was much different than sacrificing riches and animals. For me, it was sacrificing old patterns, old habits, old friends, and an old lifestyle. No longer could I stay out late, go out to parties, or be irresponsible. It was time to prepare for my new life as a professional wrestler by sacrificing the things that no longer served me. If it wasn't going to help me become a professional wrestler, I had to sacrifice it. If it wasn't going to help the Israelites make it to the Promised Land, they had to sacrifice it. You see, sacrificing something might look different from person to person, but sometimes the best way to prepare for a transition is to sacrifice that what no longer serves you. If you're transitioning into a new job, maybe it's time to sacrifice old clothes for some new professional clothes. If you're transitioning to a new school, maybe it's time to let go of some bad old relationships and find healthier ones. Whatever the sacrifice you're making to prepare for that new transition is, the point is not that you're losing something. It's that you're sacrificing something that's holding you back for something that's going to bring you forward. Now look, I know transitions are hard, and often it feels like there's no way to prepare for them. But I encourage you to look at your transitions as an opportunity. an opportunity to sacrifice things that don't serve you to make room for the new blessings and new opportunities that are coming your way. Be open to what might come, and who knows, this next transition in your life might be the promised land that you've been dreaming of.